Okay, so the Senate has passed their budget and their sales tax bill, and it's going over to the House side, and there's a total. Are you optimistic? Is the governor optimistic that at midnight tonight, when everybody goes, see ya, that there will be a deal done?
Yes, we are optimistic, and we hope it'll be well before midnight. That's the absolute last moment, but I hope today that there's a lot left to do, but there are not that many instruments left to deal with. So the whole focus will be on reaching an agreement on the budget and reaching an agreement on the revenue measures.
So what, right now, the differences between the Senate version and the House version are as follows?
Well, they're significant. I mean, there are a lot of changes in the revenue measure. The House sent over a third of a penny to be extended, and the Senate went to make that a half penny. That's the biggest item in the revenue portion of the package, and it requires a 2/3 vote on the House to either agree with what the Senate did right off the bat and say that's going to be the deal, or the bill could go to conference, which means 3 people from the House and 3 people from the Senate would be on a conference committee charged with fashioning a resolution one way or the other.
This is not, pardon me, this is not your first day. What do you expect?
Well, I'm expecting and hoping that there's going to be a resolution today, and that the Senate budget is going to be adopted, and that the revenue measure that the Senate sent over likewise will be adopted. That'll enable us to fully fund TOPS, to fully fund our medical school in Shreveport and all of our partner hospitals, fully fund higher education, make some cuts to the Department of Health but not force us to have to cut some of these optional services that have been the subject of a lot of discussion over the course of the past several months.
The Senate plan brings in $540 million. The governor and you guys say you need $640 million. Where's the $100 million coming from? Do you have an idea what will be cut?
Oh, yeah. The budget makes those cuts. I mean, there's a percentage cut in a number of the departments of state government, a number of things that we'd like to see funded are not going to be funded. And you got to keep in mind there already were dramatic cuts imposed by the governor at the time we presented the budget, knowing not all the revenue would be made available to us. So you're knocking on the door of $200 million in cuts overall that will be made from the budget, and those are not without some consequences. But
tell us about that. How will residents feel these cuts?
Well, it's hard to say. We'll have to determine what percentage cut is allocated to the various departments. It absolutely could mean some layoffs, I'm afraid, in some areas of government. I don't know that for sure yet. We've got to analyze exactly where those percentage cuts would be if the budget is adopted. For example, the $20 million facility in Bunkie for juveniles that has been completed and ready to open that we have not yet been able to open, we'll only have partial funding to open it for. We'll have to delay the opening of it yet again. And that's an example of jobs that won't be created in the Avoyelles Parish area.
Mr. J., there's a lot of folks on the House side, as you know, who have said that the third of a penny amount and the temporary tax at 5 years, I think it was, that anything other than that is kind of a deal breaker. What do you really, are there any signs from the House side and or from the Senate side that make you think that there could be a compromise?
Well, I do think there can be a compromise, and those in the House who say the deal is a third of a penny and 5 years and that's it, if they continue to hold that position, they would then have to live with the cuts that were made in the House budget that was sent over, and there were significant cuts made in that budget. A lot of things that were not able to be done. TOPS not fully funded, optional Medicaid services greatly at risk, the potential for higher education not to be fully funded. So those who say that's the line in the sand, I'm not voting for anything else, would have to then own the serious cuts that would be made. And this is the opportunity for the House, 2/3 a member of the House. There won't be unanimity in the House by any stretch, but I think 2/3 of the membership in the House want to solve this problem that they've been avoiding for a couple of years now in many special sessions at a great expense to the people of this state. And to not have a budget or a resolution to the revenue issue after this special session, having failed in the first special session, having failed in the regular session, to then say to the people, well, we're going to cost you $60,000 a day to come back in late June and have another special session. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It sounds to me like you're saying that it's all up to the House to compromise, not on the Senate. Is that your stance?
Well, it's absolutely correct. The House took the position that this is it, our way or the highway, and the Senate said, no, that's not the way this process works. We're going to make changes we think are appropriate in the revenue measures and in the budget. And that's what a compromise involves. And so now this is going back to the House, and I would suggest in an appropriate compromise fashion, and the House gets to debate and decide whether or not they want to fix this problem once and for all, or whether they want to come back in another special session and try and fix it, because they'll be back. The fiscal year ends on June 30th, and we've got a couple more weeks to try and avoid the catastrophe of not having a budget and shutting down services.
The halfpenny that the Senate wants, you told us that you wanted it to be permanent. You needed a permanent solution. It looks like it's still temporary. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. It's 7 years. It went from 5 years to 7 years, and it's not permanent. I wish it was permanent, but 7 years is a lot better than 5 years for this reason. A 5-year sunset would take it into next election year and the next cycle, which makes no sense at all. And the 7 years at least gives the whole next term to have the debate about a constitutional convention, to have the debate about further tax reform, to do the kind of things that people have been talking about and legitimately can be debated. But it would at least push things out 7 years. We're creating another cliff, but it's not another cliff that would happen even in the next term. And that's better than having a 3-year cliff or a 5-year cliff.
You feel confident that the situation, the financial situation, will be fixed, and this tax can come off the books in 7 years?
No, I don't think you're going to be able to. I think it would be fixed for 7 years, and the debate would then ensue as to whether or not this ought to be continued in the manner in which it would be voted on now, or whether there ought to be some change in the tax system between now and then. You're not going to be able to roll off. Who knows what that amount will be 7 years from now? But as we've seen in this debate, you can't just give up $1.4 billion in revenue to the state and expect the state to continue doing what the people want to do by way of TOPS and health care and higher education and corrections and everything else.